Leave the European Union, the resignation of one Prime Minister and the arrival of another. Adam Fleming looks back on a tumultuous year in British politics and Review 2016, the year in politics.
Ever feel you need to get away from it all? Especially when 10 years' worth of politics has been squeezed into just one.
I believe that this Thursday can be our country's Independence Day.
I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Tomorrow is going to be a very historic day. I really believe that. I think it's going to be a Brexit plus. Does that make sense?
My pitch is very simple. I'm Theresa May and I think I'm the best person to be Prime Minister of this country.
I'm political reporter Adam Fleming. Come with me to our secluded log cabin. There's no Wi-Fi, no mobile phone reception. It's just you, me and a whole lot of events to think about. It was the issue that split the nation. The European Union. Leave or remain. In the first part of the year, David Cameron embarked on the first half of his Europe strategy, renegotiating our membership of the EU with his fellow leaders.
It's great
It
to
meant
be back
lots of
in
these,
Warsaw.
known in the trade as the grip and grin. If it was Thursday, it must be Hungary. Is that the Prime Minister of Slovenia or Slovakia? It all came to a head at a tense summit in Brussels in February.
I'll be battling for Britain. If we can get a good deal, I'll take that deal, but I will not take a deal that doesn't meet what we need.
That involved a lot of croissants. Cameron's agreement with the Euro bosses limited benefits for migrants from the EU and exempted Britain from the idea of ever closer union. Deal done. The referendum was on.
And I will go to Parliament and propose that the British people decide our future in Europe through an in-out referendum on Thursday, the 23rd of June.
Time for the Cabinet to choose sides.
Home Secretary, are you a Romanian? Are you a pair of outers? Chancellor, I'm guessing you're an inner, aren't you?
6 frontbenchers joined the official out campaign called Vote Leave. Among them, David Cameron's political pal Michael Gove. The world waited to see which way this other big beast would jump. After a weekend of agonising, Boris Johnson leapt for leave.
The last thing I wanted was to go against David Cameron or the government. But after a great deal of heartache, I don't think there's anything else I can do.
Boris, if that's really what you've thought all along, why have you kept your party waiting for such a long time?
Because the truth is that it has been agonisingly difficult.
The other side geared up, launching Britain Stronger in Europe, led by Sir Stuart Rose, the former boss of M&S. A few other things were happening.
Factually wrong, racist remarks.
Like a bad-tempered row in Labour about how the party handled accusations of anti-Semitism. In the United States, Donald Trump was about to become the Republican nominee for president. On our side of the Atlantic, MPs criticised his plan to ban Muslims entering the US.
His comments regarding Muslims are wrong. His policy to close borders, if he is elected as president, is bonkers. And if he met one or two of my constituents in one of the many excellent pubs in my constituency, then they may well tell him that he is a wazzock for dealing with this issue in this way.
But it was all right, because he'd never win, would he? And the Work and Pensions Secretary Ian Duncan Smith resigned. Some thought it was really about Europe. He said it was because the government was hurting the poor.
And that unfairness is damaging to the government, it's damaging to the party, and it's actually damaging to the public.
Incredibly strong passions had been kindled. Now it was time to fire up the referendum campaign for real. The Remain campaign relied on potential risks, spelled out in a series of weighty Treasury documents.
Britain would be permanently poorer if we left the European Union.
It was all backed up with assertions from the global great and the good, who claimed Brexit would be bad for Britain's place in the world.
Because our focus is in negotiating with a big bloc of the European Union to get a trade agreement done. And UK is going to be in the back of the queue.
Bad for the economy.
Negotiations on new arrangements with the European Union and other trading partners could, in our view, take years.
Which would be bad for your wallet, even when it came to holidays.
It is just not as easy to fly across Europe as it is today if you leave the EU.
A message spelled out in a government leaflet sent to every single household. Politically, the Remain campaign was made up of blue, red, yellow and green, although Labour's leader Jeremy Corbyn tended to stick to his own script.
I believe we have to vote to Remain in order to defend investment, defend jobs, defend workers' rights and defend our environment.
He left much of his side's campaigning to Alan Johnson. Vote Leave had its own large red vehicle. Let's call it the Boris Johnson Fun Bus.
UK asparagus will be just as sprouting, just as delicious.
Vote Leave. Vote Leave.
Going on. So, there you go.
Yes, that's him auctioning a cow.
Boris, 2 questions. First of all, where are your wellies? And second of all,
There's hardly any muck on the front.
His message was summed up in 3 words.
Take back control.
Sorry, what was that?
Take back control. We can take back control. If we take back control.
They meant control of immigration with a points-based system.
Those who are the brightest and the best with the right skills for our economy would be welcome here, and actually this would be a fairer system.
Control over whether Turkey would eventually join the European Union.
This referendum is going to be our last chance to have a say on that. We're not going to be consulted or asked to vote on whether we think those countries or others should join.
And control over the money Britain sent to the EU, although that was hotly disputed.
I am staggered that Boris Johnson is standing here tonight still defending this £350 million a week figure. It's a scandal that that's still emblazoned across the campaign button.
Can you hear me?
No. And there wasn't just one Leave campaign. Nigel Farage and the UKIP crew ran their own. They had boats and a tougher tone on immigration.
Because the EU is making a mess of virtually everything. First we had the Eurozone, then we had the EU's common asylum policy, compounded hugely by Angela Merkel, and what we've seen are huge streams of people coming into Europe over the course of the last year, no security checks done on anybody.
Or you could sign up for Grassroots Out, an alliance of Tory backbenchers and a few other characters.
Left, right, forward march to victory on the 23rd of June.
As the battle went on, Leavers capitalised on feelings that there was something fishy about the entire political establishment.
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts with organisations from acronyms
people of this country have had enough of experts.
From organisations with acronyms saying that they know what is best and getting it consistently wrong.
Old foes became firm allies, but among the Tories, things were getting more and more unfriendly.
From Boris, well, he's the life and soul of the party, but he's not the man you want driving you home at the end of the evening.
Blue on Blue, as it was known, turned into all-out war when George Osborne theorised about a harsh Brexit budget.
The sorts of tax rises we could see include a 2p rise in the basic rate of income tax to 22%, a 3p rise in the higher rate to 43%.
I think it's probably the most irresponsible act by a Chancellor that I have seen in 24 years sitting in the House of Commons.
Then everything stopped.
The Labour MP Jo Cox is killed in her West Yorkshire constituency.
The Labour MP and mum of 2, Jo Cox, was murdered in a street in her constituency. Her killer idolised the Nazis and would later be sentenced to life in prison. The referendum gave way to reflection. Campaigning resumed a few days later, and there was this final plea from the Prime Minister.
So as you take this decision, whether to remain or leave, do think about the hopes and dreams of your children and grandchildren.
The big finish, the BBC's great debate at Wembley Arena.
So that's the enormous audience. We've got a massive stage which has got 6 lecterns on it. Shall we have a debate about the EU? You all ready? Come on.
The closing arguments went like this.
The economists, the scientists, the business leaders, the trade unions, the health professionals, they all agree that Britain is better off in. You are better off in.
And if we vote leave and take back control, I believe that this Thursday can be our country's Independence Day.
On June the 23rd, the UK decided its future.
And we all know how that went.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
For Leavers, jubilation that they'd won almost 52%. That was more than 17 million votes.
Brexit!
For Remainers, who'd secured 48%, simply shock. Early in the morning in Downing Street, David Cameron announced it was game over.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Although I'll always remember that look on Sam Cam's face. Scotland voted to remain, and the First Minister hinted at a renewed push for independence.
It is a statement of the obvious that the option of a second referendum must be on the table, and it is on the table.
Back at Westminster, the winners took in the gravity of the situation.
We are still, and always have been, an exceptionally outward-looking country. We will continue to be so. We will be a good neighbour. We will be a good internationalist. But we will have taken back control of our democratic institutions.
So, can you see why I wanted a bit of peace and quiet in my log cabin in the woods? And the vote to leave only takes us halfway through the year.
A whole heap of books have been written about the referendum by journalists, by party donors, by David Cameron's former spin doctor. But to many people, what happened next was more like a box set of Game of Thrones.
Mr Johnson, any message of reassurance for the country?
His profile sky high after the referendum, Boris Johnson looked like he might inherit the crown. Or would it be someone less showy?
My pitch is very simple. I'm Theresa May and I think I'm the best person to be Prime Minister of this country.
Michael Gove launched an attempt that was ultimately doomed. The problem? He was supposed to be managing Boris Johnson's bid for the top job.
Having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
Yes, his supporters wept on a day that's become synonymous with Tory treachery.
But during the course of the last few days, I've realised that while Boris does have those very special abilities to communicate and to reach out, what he did not have was the capacity to build and to lead that team and to provide the leadership the country needs at this critical moment.
It left only one other contender.
Andrea Leadsom.
The Energy Minister and energetic Leave campaigner Andrea Leadsom.
What do we want? Leadsom for leader! When do we want it? Now!
Her supporters mounted a quite bizarre march on Parliament. Then she gave a newspaper interview which was interpreted as her saying she'd make a better PM because she had kids. And her campaign ground to a halt.
I have, however, concluded that the interests of our country are best served by the immediate appointment of a strong and well-supported Prime Minister.
And so Theresa May arrived in Downing Street.
If you're just managing, I want to address you directly. I know you're working around the clock. I know you're doing your best, and I know that sometimes life can be a struggle. The government I lead will be driven not by the interests of the privileged few, but by yours. We will do everything we can to give you more control over your lives.
She paused plans for a new nuclear power station at Hinkley Point over concerns about Chinese involvement, then gave it the go-ahead. She approved a third runway at Heathrow with a vote in Parliament due in a year. She planned to let grammar schools expand in England. And who said she didn't have a funny side?
What message of reassurance does the Prime Minister have for fat, middle-aged white men who may feel that we have been left behind?
That's a very interesting point. Perhaps my honourable friend would like to come up and see me sometime.
The job of Chancellor went to Philip Hammond, whose nicknames include Spreadsheet and Box Office. He ditched a target to balance the nation's books by 2020. Amber Rudd was named Home Secretary. She faced near record levels of immigration.
Were you going to be able to get immigration down to the tens of thousands quickly?
Just going to get started. Thank you.
And chaos at the independent inquiry into historic child abuse. And we were introduced to the three Brexiteers: the International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, Brexit Secretary, David Davis, and Bojo, rebooted as Foreign Secretary, spreading charm.
Je suis ravi d'être en France aujourd'hui.
And keeping comedians in work.
Foreign Secretary, on the subjects of Europe, is Brexit living up to all of your hopes and expectations for Britain so far?
Of course. Brexit has already been a wonderful journey.
Boris Johnson, what do you say?
No, I say we never really sort of expected to win. I think me getting behind Brexit sort of a bit of a laugh, really, just to plaster numbers all over a bus.
In Scotland, the Tories' other leading lady, Ruth Davidson, was having a blast. In elections for the Scottish Parliament, the Conservatives steamed in second, forcing Labour into third place north of the border.
Labour found itself with a bit of a puzzle. Its leader, Jeremy Corbyn, was immensely popular with party members, not so much with his members of Parliament, some of whom described his performance in the referendum campaign as pretty lacklustre.
Morning.
Early one morning, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Hilary Benn, was sacked. Much of the rest of the Shadow Cabinet packed their bags, including Angela Eagle.
You found this personally very difficult?
Yeah. But I feel that I've served in the best way I can, and today I had to go.
She launched a leadership challenge, but dropped out when the Welsh Labour MP Owen Smith got more support.
Can we get through, please? Thank you very much.
At a fractious party meeting, there was a row about whether Jeremy Corbyn could automatically stand in the contest. Yes, he could. And there was a court case over which members and supporters could actually vote. No, not all of them. Owen Smith presented himself as a more competent Corbyn.
I think the party that I love and the party that has been such a engine for social change and an engine for justice in this country is in jeopardy of not being able to do that, is in danger of not being able to form a future Labour government and change people's lives for the better.
While JC crisscrossed the country, often by train, getting into a furious row with Virgin about whether he could get a seat. Didn't stop him winning re-election as leader, and with a bigger share of the vote than before.
We are proud as a party that we're not afraid to discuss openly, to debate and disagree. That is essential for a party that wants to change the people's lives for the better, that isn't prepared to accept things as they are. It's also an essential part of what has drawn over 500,000 people into membership of what is now the largest political party anywhere in Western Europe.
Corbyn's Labour Party had victories elsewhere, like the mayoral election in Bristol. Sadiq Khan was elected Mayor of London.
What the vote on Thursday showed is London is proud of the son of a bus driver from a council estate, the child of immigrants, being the mayor of our great city.
The former Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls did surprisingly well on Strictly.
So there's Krabby, he's jumping up and down.
Krabby's jumping.
And then
Jezza had time for fun too, catching some Pokemon with me in a park. The party ended the year where it started, with Jeremy Corbyn at its centre. A previous Labour leader, Tony Blair, came under scrutiny with the publication of the Chilcot Inquiry's report into the Iraq War. It was 2.3 million words long.
The decision to go to war in Iraq and to remove Saddam Hussein from power in a coalition of over 40 countries led by the United States of America was the hardest, most momentous, most agonising decision I took in my 10 years as British Prime Minister.
Now, UKIP. Where to start? After basically causing the referendum and then winning it, Nigel Farage resigned as UKIP leader.
During the referendum campaign, I said, I want my country back. And what I'm saying today is I want my life back. And it begins right now. Thank you.
Diane James succeeded him, but didn't much like the look of it and quit after 18 days. The next frontrunner, Stephen Wolfe, was hospitalised following an alleged punch-up with a fellow MEP. After he left hospital, he left UKIP.
And I will be withdrawing my application to become leader of UKIP. I'm actually withdrawing myself from UKIP.
You're resigning from the party?
I'm resigning with immediate effect.
The next leadership contest was won by Paul Nuttall.
There are open goals in British politics today, but UKIP has to be on the pitch to kick the ball into the back of the empty net. And that open goal is no more apparent than when it comes to the Labour Party.
Meanwhile, Mr Farage was making friends and influencing people in the United States.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory, and I congratulated her and her family.
The Nigel visited the Donald in Trump Tower shortly after his victory.
Did Mr Trump bring you invite you to come today?
We're just tourists.
Prompting this tweet from the president-elect. Many people would like to see Nigel Farage represent Great Britain as their ambassador to the United States. He would do a great job. No thanks, said the British government.
Hang on, we haven't mentioned Brexit for about 4 minutes.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
At the Tory party conference in October, the Prime Minister explained a bit more about what that meant. For example, the Great Repeal Bill. Pay attention now.
We will convert the acquis, that's the body of existing EU law, into British law. When the Great Repeal Bill is given royal assent, Parliament will be free, subject to international agreements and treaties with other countries, and the EU on matters such as trade, to amend, repeal and improve any law it chooses.
She also said she'd trigger the negotiation process with other leaders, the so-called Article 50, by the end of March. But the investor Gina Miller had other ideas. She won a case at the High Court that only Parliament could start it. The government challenged that ruling at the Supreme Court. Big stakes constitutionally. Perry Mason, it was not.
You have a set of files called CA.
On the electronic bundle.
On the electronic bundle, it's 1697.
It's 543.
I think you're saying it's bundle 3, tab 5. I think that's the... it's volume 5.
The judges will give their verdict in a few weeks' time. Meanwhile, Brexit Secretary David Davis had to explain he hadn't really described his counterpart in the European Parliament as Satan.
And I was being tempted by the chairman of the Select Committee to criticise you. So I said, get thee behind me, Satan. He was the Satan, not you.
That clarifies it all.
He's examining the pros and cons of Brexit on 50 different sectors of the economy, from cakes to cars. It's certainly doing terrible things to the English language.
Prime Minister leads us towards a smart and smooth Brexit, as I like to call it, a Smexit.
And conference, mark my words, we will make Brexit a success.
And was there a Brexit effect in Richmond? Zach Goldsmith triggered a by-election in his southwest London seat over Heathrow. The Lib Dems nabbed it after a very pro-EU campaign.
It's a good morning. Start of many more.
Yes, the Lib Dems. Remember them?
At the moment, Theresa May is listening to her UKIP-ish wing, which now appears to control the Conservative Party. Now maybe she'll listen to some panic-stricken Tory MPs with Liberal Democrats breathing down their necks who'll say, hang about, isn't it time you listen to the electorate, who may or may not want Brexit, but they certainly don't want a hard Brexit.
So farewell 2016. Hello 2017. Donald Trump will be inaugurated as President of the United States. There'll be elections in France and Germany. We'll have elections for mayors in Manchester, Liverpool and Birmingham. But British politics will be overwhelmingly dominated by the negotiations for our exit from the EU. Hang on, maybe I should head back in there. Nah, I can't miss all of that.